What if I told you that Lewis Hamilton's climb from the 20th position to the 10th position in Las Vegas looked like a straightforward recovery, but once Frédéric Vasseur opened the Ferrari data, he discovered a decisive maneuver that Hamilton executed at the perfect moment, a maneuver so precise and so unexpected that it completely reframed the team's understanding of his race. You saw Hamilton gain 10 positions, but you did not see what happened inside the cockpit. Ferrari's telemetry revealed that Hamilton made a self-driven adjustment in the middle phase of the race, a technique that stabilized the SF-25 during a critical temperature drop. No engineer instructed him to do it. No message came through the radio. Hamilton recognized the danger and acted on instinct, preventing the tires from falling out of their fragile thermal window. And the most shocking part is this. Without that maneuver, the SF-25 would have lost even more tire temperature on the long Las Vegas straights, and Hamilton's recovery would have collapsed. Ferrari expected degradation. They expected instability. But they did not expect Hamilton to read the car so accurately that he solved a structural weakness in real time. Stay right here, because once you understand Hamilton's decisive maneuver, why Vasseur was stunned when he found it in the data, and how it changed the entire trajectory of his Las Vegas race, you will see his drive not as a simple climb, but as one of the most intelligent performances of his Ferrari career. The Las Vegas Grand Prix placed Lewis Hamilton in one of the most demanding scenarios of his first season with Ferrari. Starting from the 20th position after a qualifying session defined by unstable tire temperatures, Hamilton approached the race with the awareness that the cold desert night would challenge every aspect of the SF-25. The asphalt held almost no heat, the straights forced the tires to cool rapidly, and the corners required precision that the car struggled to deliver. From the moment he rolled onto the formation lap, Hamilton prepared himself for a 50-lap battle where improvisation and experience would matter more than outright pace. When the lights went out, Hamilton found himself in the most chaotic section of the grid. Cars ahead locked brakes and scrambled for traction through a surface that felt colder than it had during qualifying. Hamilton could feel the front refusing to engage and the rear hesitating in the early corners, but instead of forcing the car, he allowed the tires to build the minimal heat they could retain. His radio messages reflected calm, controlled analysis rather than panic. He explained what the car was doing, where the balance was shifting, and how unstable the rotation felt, giving the team the clarity it needed while keeping his own driving measured and deliberate. As the field settled, Hamilton began methodically moving forward. He studied the behavior of every driver ahead, identifying those who overstressed their tires and those who hesitated under braking. Ferrari monitored his progress and realized he was advancing not through superior machinery, but through a deep understanding of grip thresholds. The SF-25 continued losing tire temperature on every straight, and yet Hamilton found ways to compensate through smoother arcs and carefully timed throttle applications. His overtakes were calculated, each one executed only when the tires carried just enough heat to avoid inducing another temperature drop. The strategic phase arrived as the pit window approached. Ferrari understood that an early stop could expose Hamilton to an even colder tire cycle, but delaying too much risked trapping him behind slower cars. When the pit stop finally came, the SF-25 rejoined in a region of the track with slightly clearer air, but the cold surface punished the tires instantly. Hamilton reported that the front slid almost immediately, confirming Ferrari's fears that the SF-25 struggled to fire up new rubber in these conditions. The team saw in real time that the tires were losing temperature more quickly than predicted, and Hamilton felt the car drifting into an unpredictable state. It was during this unstable period that Hamilton began adjusting his technique. Ferrari did not instruct him to change his inputs or modify his lines. Instead, he recognized that the tires were at risk of falling beneath the operational threshold, and that the aerodynamic platform would collapse if he allowed the temperature to drop further. Without announcing it on the radio, Hamilton altered his entry speeds, carrying slightly longer arcs to generate lateral load. This subtle shift would later appear clearly in the telemetry. At the time, it looked to the outside world like normal driving. Internally, it was the beginning of the decisive maneuver that kept the SF-25 alive. By the final laps, Hamilton had placed himself firmly inside the top 10. The car remained unstable, the tires continued dipping in temperature, and the balance never truly settled. Yet Hamilton managed the final stint with remarkable composure, reading the changing grip through every section of the circuit. When he crossed the finish line with a 10-position recovery, it appeared as a clean execution of strategy. Only later, when Vasseur reviewed the telemetry, did Ferrari realize that Hamilton had executed a complex, instinctive adjustment in the middle of the race. That hidden maneuver protected the tires from collapse and held the SF25 inside a narrow performance window, preparing the shock Vasseur would express in the debrief. The core problem that shaped Hamilton's Las Vegas race was the Ferrari SF25's inability to generate and retain heat in its tires. This limitation had already crippled his qualifying performance, and the race exposed it with relentless clarity. The cold desert air drained energy from the rubber faster than Hamilton could build it, and the long straights punished the tires even more by keeping them well below their operational range. Every time Hamilton attempted to push, the car resisted with a front end that refused to bite and a rear that hesitated before taking load. This baseline instability created a situation where Hamilton had to manage a machine that never settled into a predictable rhythm. As the laps progressed, Hamilton reported that the front tires consistently slid under initial turn-in. He was forced to adjust his braking points, delaying commitment to the apex because he could not rely on the grip he normally uses to guide the car through the early phase of the corner. Ferrari monitored the temperature traces and saw the exact pattern they feared. The tires gained a small amount of heat during the corners, but immediately lost that heat on the straights. This constant cycling prevented the SF25 from entering the thermal window required to stabilize the aerodynamic platform. The result was a car that shifted balance unpredictably depending on the specific point of the lap. This unstable tire behavior created a deeper aerodynamic issue. The SF25 depends heavily on a stable underbody airflow to generate downforce, but when the tires cool, the car rides slightly higher, disrupting the sealing effect beneath the chassis. The aerodynamic load curves showed sudden drops during the mid-corner phases, which matched Hamilton's descriptions of hesitation through the apex and uncontrolled movement on the exit. The car oscillated between mild understeer and unexpected oversteer, exposing Hamilton to fluctuations that forced him to read the surface continuously rather than trust the natural behavior of the machinery. Traffic amplified these challenges significantly. Hamilton spent the first part of the race overtaking cars that were also struggling for grip. To complete maneuvers, he had to move offline, brake in colder patches of asphalt, and accelerate on surfaces with inconsistent grip. Each defensive movement from his rivals forced additional steering corrections and brief slides that drained even more heat from the tires. Ferrari saw that Hamilton's overtakes looked clean on television, but internally the telemetry showed he was driving on a knife edge, adapting his inputs with extreme delicacy to prevent the SF25 from losing stability entirely. The pit stop brought new tires, but the fresh rubber provided little relief. The cold track punished the compound immediately, and Hamilton felt the front sliding on his out lap even before he had completed a full sequence of corners. The tires again required several laps to reach their minimal working condition, and even then the balance remained inconsistent. Ferrari's data confirmed that the issue was not related to tire wear or strategy. The problem was structural. The SF25 could not generate enough internal heat in the tire carcass to keep the aerodynamic platform engaged. Hamilton was driving a car that offered only temporary pockets of grip before falling back into instability. By the final third of the race, the problem was fully exposed. Hamilton was managing tires that refused to stabilize aerodynamic loads that shifted corner by corner, and a balance that demanded constant interpretation. Ferrari could see that the SF25 never once reached its design performance state. Yet Hamilton maintained pace, defended positions, and extracted every fraction of grip available. The instability he managed would later form the foundation for the decisive maneuver Vasseur discovered in the telemetry. It was clear that Hamilton was not driving a car that supported him. He was driving a car that he had to save, lap after lap, from falling out of control. Frédéric Vasseur began the post-race analysis by studying the temperature traces of Hamilton's tires, and what he saw immediately shifted his understanding of in-tire drive. The Ferrari SF25 had failed to reach a stable thermal state at any point of the race, and the data displayed a clear pattern of constant cooling during every straight, followed by incomplete heating through the corners. The tires were never alive, never balanced, and never in the working range Ferrari needed. Yet despite this instability, Hamilton had maintained forward momentum. Vasseur understood immediately that something unusual had happened because the SF25 should have lost far more time given the severity of the temperature oscillations. As Vasseur continued into the aerodynamic load graphs, the situation became even more surprising. The downforce traces revealed repeated drops exactly at the points where the tires lost temperature. These drops destabilized the aerodynamic floor, reducing the ground effect suction and causing unpredictable cornering behavior. Hamilton's radio messages during the race described this instability with precision, mentioning hesitation on entry and a delayed response on the exit. But the telemetry showed something else as well. Hamilton's microcorrections were perfectly timed to soften each aerodynamic fluctuation. His steering traces displayed an almost anticipatory pattern, as though he knew precisely when the car would lose grip before it actually did. The comparison between Hamilton and Leclerc gave Vasseur the next piece of the puzzle. Both drivers had suffered from the same structural limitation, but Hamilton's input patterns were fundamentally different. Leclerc drove around the problem when it appeared. Hamilton preempted it. His traces showed earlier steering sets, slightly higher minimum speeds, and corner profiles that generated more lateral load without overstressing the tires. Vasseur realized here that Hamilton had identified the car's thermal weakness before Ferrari had even discussed solutions on the radio. The car behaved worse for Hamilton in the data, yet he extracted more stability from it through technique alone.